The story of Diego Armando Maradona does not begin on the manicured lawns of Wembley or the hallowed turf of the Azteca Stadium. It begins in the mud, the dust, and the desperate hope of Villa Fiorito, a villa miseria, shantytown, clinging to the southern fringes of Buenos Aires. Here, in a three-room shack with a corrugated tin roof, where 8 children shared beds and a single light bulb fought against the gloom, a footballing deity was forged. His genius was not gifted. It was hammered out on the anvil of poverty, a primal response to a world that offered little. Diego Maradona's biography is the quintessential Argentine parable, a rise from nothing, a dizzying ascent to godhood, a tragic fall, and an eternal, complicated legacy. It is the story of a man who was never just a footballer. He was a symbol, a rebellion, and a raw nerve for a nation. Chapter 1. Villa Fiorito, the crucible of hunger and hope. Born on October 30th, 1960, Diego was the 5th of 8 children to Diego Sr., a factory worker of humble Guarani indigenous ancestry, and Dalma Salvadora Franco, Doña Tota, a strong-willed homemaker. The Maradonas existed. They did not live. Diego Sr. labored relentlessly at a chemical plant, his hands worn, his spirit weighed down by the impossibility of providing. Doña Tota managed the chaos of their home, a fragile sanctuary of love amidst scarcity. Dinner was often a meager portion of stew, stretched to fill 8 hungry mouths. The bathroom was an outdoor latrine shared with neighbors. The cold Pampero wind would whistle through the cracks in the walls in winter. In this landscape, football was not a game. It was a visceral, tangible dream of escape. The local dirt pitch, known as Las Latas, the cans, was Diego's cathedral. The ball was rarely a proper one. It was a pelota de trapo, a rag ball, a bundle of socks and rags tightly bound with string, or, on lucky days, a half-deflated plastic ball. The goals were piles of bricks or jackets. He played from dawn until his mother's voice cut through the twilight, calling him home. He played against boys 5, 6 years older, bigger, stronger, street-tough kids who would knock him down without a second thought. Here, he developed his supernatural low center of gravity, his ability to ride tackles as if his feet were magnetized to the earth, and his mesmerizing dribbling, a necessary skill to protect his precious rag ball from being stolen. His first coach was his cousin, Betulo, who saw not just talent, but an obsessive, almost frightening love for the ball. He would sleep with it, he would talk to it. It was his first and most faithful friend. Chapter 2. The Prodigy Discovered, Cebollitas, and the Promise of a Nation. By the age of 8, whispers had escaped Villa Fiorito. They spoke of a pibe with a left foot that could make the ball sing. The rumors reached Francisco Pancho Cornejo, a scout for the famed Buenos Aires club Argentinos Juniors. Skeptical but curious, Cornejo made the journey to the shantytown. What he witnessed in a crowded, chaotic neighborhood game left him speechless. A stocky, dark-haired boy was conducting the entire match as if he were a maestro and every other player was an instrument. His control was absolute, his vision preternatural. He didn't just beat players, he humiliated them, not with arrogance, but with an artistry that seemed to belong to another world. Cornejo approached Diego Sr. and Doña Tota. For the family, this was not an opportunity, it was a miracle. Argentinos Juniors offered a path out. At 10 years old, Diego joined the club's legendary youth team, Los Cebollitas, the Little Onions. To keep him constantly involved, coaches played him as a central midfielder. But Diego was a force of nature that defied tactics. He would drop deep, collect the ball, and embark on slaloming runs that dismantled entire defenses. The Cebollitas, powered by this once-in-a-century prodigy, embarked on a mythical 136-match unbeaten streak, a record in Argentine youth football that stands as a monument to his childhood dominance. The Argentine sports press, always hungry for a savior, descended. They christened him El Pibe de Oro, the Golden Boy. At 11, he gave a tearful, shy television interview, his voice barely a whisper, stating his two dreams: to play for Argentina and to win the World Cup. The nation watched, captivated. He was the incarnation of the Argentine dream, talent triumphing over circumstance. But the weight of that national projection, placed on the narrow shoulders of a preteen from the Villa, was a burden that would shape and ultimately haunt his entire life. Chapter 3. The Burden of El Pibe de Oro, Adolescence Under a Microscope. His professional debut for Argentinos Juniors' first team arrived on October 20, 1976, 10 days before his 16th birthday. The Argentine Primera División in the late 1970s was a lawless, physical war zone. Grizzled defenders saw the chubby, baby-faced teenager as easy prey. They kicked, elbowed, and scythed him down. The message was brutal: welcome to the men's game. Diego's response became his trademark. He got up, dusted himself off, and dribbled past the same defender again, this time with even more audacious skill. He didn't seek revenge with violence, he sought it with beauty, a far more devastating riposte. Goals, assists, and moments of magic followed. He was no longer just a player, he was a phenomenon. He carried the financial hopes of his entire extended family. With his first significant earnings, he bought his parents a simple but solid brick house in a better neighborhood, a moment of profound pride and fulfillment. Yet the pressures of fame erupted in parallel. The nightclubs of Buenos Aires beckoned as an escape from the relentless scrutiny. He was a teenager with the world on his shoulders and the temptations of a metropolis at his feet. The ultimate call came from the Argentine national team. He made his full international debut at 16 years and 120 days against Hungary in February 1977. The 1978 World Cup, to be hosted by Argentina, was on the horizon. The entire country assumed their golden boy would be the shining star. In a decision that shocked the nation and scarred Diego, coach César Luis Menotti, a philosophical tactician, left the 17-year-old out of the final squad. Menotti believed the psychological pressure would break the boy, preferring experienced, mentally ready players. Argentina, led by Mario Kempes, won the World Cup on home soil. Diego watched the celebrations on television, a mix of national pride and personal devastation churning inside him. That night, a new, steely resolve hardened within him. He would not just play in a World Cup, he would own one. He would become the hero Menotti didn't believe he could be. Chapter 4. Barcelona, the false start in the Cathedral of Broken Dreams. After carrying Argentinos Juniors for 5 seasons and a glorious dream-fulfilling year at Boca Juniors where he won the 1981 Metropolitano title, Europe's elite clubs waged a financial war for his signature. In 1982, FC Barcelona won, paying a world record £5 million. The move to Catalonia was supposed to be his coronation as the world's best player on one of its grandest stages. Instead, it became a painful lesson in cynicism and physical brutality. Spain was alienating. He struggled with the language and the formal Catalan culture. On the pitch, he became a marked man in the most literal, violent sense. The apex of this savagery came on September 24, 1983, when Athletic Bilbao's defender Andoni Goicoechea, nicknamed the Butcher of Bilbao, launched a tackle from behind so vicious it shattered the ligaments in Maradona's left ankle. The sound, those nearby said, was sickening. The injury required immediate surgery and a long, lonely rehabilitation. Maradona felt betrayed by the football establishment that allowed such violence to flourish. He had flashes of brilliance at Barca, a mesmerizing solo goal against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, a Copa del Rey win, but it was a relationship poisoned by injury, illness, he contracted hepatitis, and conflict with the club's board. The end was as explosive as his talent. In the 1984 Copa del Rey final, again against Athletic Bilbao, a mass brawl erupted on the pitch after the final whistle. Maradona was at its heart, lashing out at the players who had tormented him. It was an ugly, symbolic finale. Barcelona decided to cut their losses. A buyer was found in a most unlikely place, a passionate, chaotic, and struggling club in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. Diego Maradona's destiny was not in a European cathedral, but in the fiery, emotional cauldron of Naples. His apotheosis awaited. When Diego Maradona arrived in Naples in July 1984, he wasn't just joining a football club, he was descending into a myth. SSC Napoli was not a sporting institution, it was a psychic wound for the city. Perennially fighting relegation, devoid of major trophies, and viewed with disdain by the wealthy industrial north of Italy, Napoli symbolized the struggles of the Mezzogiorno, Italy's impoverished south. The city itself was a breathtaking, chaotic paradox, stunning bay views juxtaposed with sprawling slums, ancient history overshadowed by modern crime and corruption. Into this tinderbox stepped a 23-year-old Argentine, already battered by fame, carrying the hopes of a shantytown and a nation on his back. What followed was not a mere footballing success, it was a cultural and spiritual uprising, a 7-year saga where a man became a deity. Chapter 5. Arrival in the Chaos, from Reject to Redeemer. Maradona's transfer fee of a second world record £6.9 million was a shock to the football world. Why Naples? Critics sneered. For the Neapolitans, it was a moment of cosmic validation. Over 75,000 fans packed the Stadio San Paolo for his presentation, a number that dwarfed the city's cathedral gatherings. They didn't see a footballer, they saw a messiah, a kumpa, a buddy who, like them, came from nothing and was disrespected by the establishment. In his first press conference, speaking halting Italian, he made a promise. I don't promise championships, but I promise that with my arrival, Napoli will become a team that is feared. It was a modest statement that ignited a wildfire of belief. The early months were a struggle. The team was mediocre, the tactics disjointed. Maradona, still carrying physical and mental scars from Barcelona, was targeted even more viciously by Serie A defenders. The league in the 1980s was the world's most defensive, home to brutal, tough guys like Claudio Gentile and tough systems like Catenaccio. Every match was a battle for survival. But slowly, under manager Ottavio Bianchi, a system crystallized around Maradona. He was given the iconic number 10 and complete tactical freedom, a libero di tutti, a free man of everything, behind two forwards. The team was built to defend fiercely and then give the ball to Diego. Everything flowed through him. Chapter 6. The Scudetto, a miracle that shook Italy. The 1986-87 season became the stuff of legend. Napoli, the eternal underdogs, challenged the northern giants of Juventus, owned by the powerful Agnelli family, AC Milan, and Inter. The campaign was a nationwide cultural war. Northern newspapers and fans hurled racist taunts. Before a match in Turin, banners read, "Welcome to Italy," and "Naples is a sewer, Neapolitans are Africans." This only fueled the fusion between player and city. Maradona wasn't just playing for points, he was avenging a people's pride. On the pitch, he was unplayable. He scored breathtaking goals, provided visionary assists, and dictated the tempo of games with a mix of street-smart cunning and artistic genius. The decisive moment came on May 10, 1987, a 1-1 draw against Fiorentina at a delirious, overflowing San Paolo secured Napoli's first-ever Serie A title. The city exploded. An estimated 1 million people poured into the streets. Fireworks, car horns, and impromptu parties lasted for days. The image of Maradona draped in a Napoli flag being carried on the shoulders of a sea of fans is etched into sporting history. He hadn't just won a league, he had delivered a sociological earthquake. As journalist Gianni Mina wrote, Maradona didn't come to Naples to play football. He came to lead a revolution. Chapter 7. The Peak, 1987 to 1990, Footballing Divinity and Personal Demons. With the Scudetto won, Maradona ascended to a state of pure footballing divinity in Naples. He led them to a Coppa Italia and UEFA Cup double in 1989 and a second Scudetto in 1990. His performances were routinely sublime. He could win games on his own, dribbling past 5 players, scoring from impossible angles, or delivering a perfect defense-splitting pass with the outside of his left foot. The Neapolitans worshipped him. Murals of him as a secular saint appeared next to images of the city's patron, San Gennaro. In the gritty Quartieri Spagnoli, his face was more common than the Pope's. He was Diego, el Dios, the God. But the pressure of being this symbol was crushing. The adulation was a cage. He couldn't walk the streets without causing a riot. The city's criminal underworld, the Camorra, also sought his friendship, blurring lines between celebrity and peril. It was during these years of peak sporting success that his personal demons, first glimpsed in Barcelona, began to consume him from within. The escape he sought was found in cocaine. What started as recreational use in the high-pressure nightlife became a dependency. The Italian football authorities had no rigorous drug testing regime. His close circle, a mix of childhood friends from Argentina and new Neapolitan associates, enabled him, either out of loyalty, fear, or their own interests. The duality was stark. By day, a god on the training pitch; by night, a man losing a private war in the city's darkest corners. The club, terrified of losing its talisman, turned a blind eye. The seeds of his downfall were being sown even as he lifted trophies. Chapter 8. The 1990 World Cup, Betrayal and the End of the Love Affair. The 1990 FIFA World Cup in Italy should have been Maradona's ultimate triumph, a coronation on the soil where he was king. Napoli was a host city. Instead, it became the catalyst for his heartbreaking fall from grace in the place he called home. Argentina, as defending champions, were a tired, aging side, overly reliant on their captain. Miraculously, Maradona dragged them to the final, with moments of sheer willpower, like his stunning, physics-defying pass to Claudio Caniggia to beat Brazil in the round of 16. But the semi-final was in Naples, against Italy. The narrative was irresistible: Maradona's adopted home versus his homeland. In the days before the match, he made a passionate, politically charged plea to Neapolitans, reminding them of the North's contempt. Italians in the North say a lot of things about Neapolitans, remember that. It was seen as a betrayal by the rest of Italy. Maradona won the semi-final on penalties. The love affair between Maradona and Naples died that night. The city felt conflicted, the nation felt wounded. In the final, a fatigued Argentina lost to West Germany. A photograph from that match tells a haunting story. Maradona, in tears, being consoled by an opponent as the Germans celebrate. He was 29, but he looked broken, physically and spiritually exhausted. The god was mortal. Upon his return to Naples after the World Cup, the atmosphere had soured. The police were now deeply interested in his connections. In March 1991, he failed a drug test for cocaine after a league match. The Italian Football Federation handed him a 15-month ban from football. The curtain fell with shocking speed. Napoli, under immense pressure, sold him to Sevilla in 1992. His departure was not the triumphant exit of a king, but the messy, tearful flight of a fallen idol. The Neapolitan Revolution was over. He had given them everything and lost himself in the process. The Naples chapter was the definitive arc of Maradona's life, the impossible rise, the glorious peak, and the tragic, self-inflicted fall. It proved he could carry a city to the heavens, but it also revealed he could not carry the weight of his own genius. As he left Italy, a global sports icon, but a man in pieces, the world wondered if the greatest footballer of all time had already played his final, truly great game. The answer, surprisingly, was yet to come, in one last defiant burst of glory on the other side of the world. Diego Maradona left Naples in 1992, not with a parade, but with a quiet, shame-filled departure. The Italian Football Federation had banned him for 15 months after a cocaine test came back positive, and the club that once worshipped him had no choice but to sell. He went to Sevilla in Spain, but it was a ghost of a move. His body was heavier, his speed was gone, and the spark in his eyes seemed dimmed. The world of football had moved on. They spoke of new stars, of Baggio and Romario, and they spoke of Maradona in the past tense, as a tragic figure whose story was essentially over. But those who knew Diego, those who understood the fire that burned in him since the dirt pitches of Via Fiorito, knew that writing him off was a dangerous game. The call from the Argentine national team came in 1993, not as a charity, but as a desperate plea. The team was floundering in qualifiers for the 1994 World Cup in the United States, at real risk of not making the tournament. Coach Alfio Basile, out of ideas and options, turned to the old captain. He was 33 years old, carrying the weight of his past excesses, but when he put on the blue and white striped shirt, something ancient and powerful stirred. The playoff against Australia was the proof. This was not the Maradona of 1986, who could dance through an entire defense. This was a general, a thinker. He positioned himself deeper, dictating the rhythm of the game with his passing. Every Argentine player looked taller, played braver, simply because he was there. His will alone seemed to pull the team across the line to qualification. The world sat up. Maybe the king still had one more coronation left in him. The 1994 World Cup in America began like a fairy tale rewritten. In Argentina's first game against Greece, he rolled back the years. A quick 1-2 on the edge of the box, a surge of that old explosive power, and a vicious left-footed finish into the net. Then came the celebration that would become iconic. He ran, wild-eyed, screaming directly into a sideline camera, his face a contorted mask of rage, joy, defiance, and liberation. It was the scream of a man exorcising every demon, answering every critic, reclaiming his throne in front of a global audience. 4 days later, against a talented Nigerian team, he produced a moment of pure, deceptive genius. A quickly taken free kick, a disguised pass that sliced open the defense for a goal. Argentina was playing with joy, and at the center of it all was a rejuvenated, smiling Diego Maradona. He was, against all odds, playing some of the best football of his life. And then, in an instant, it all vanished. After that Nigeria game, FIFA's drug testers arrived, a routine random test. The result, when it came, was like a bomb detonating on the tournament. He had tested positive for a banned cocktail of stimulants, including ephedrine. The explanation from his camp was a contaminated energy drink. Few outside his most loyal supporters believed it. The simpler, sadder truth was that his oldest enemy had caught up with him at the worst possible moment. FIFA had no choice. They expelled him from the World Cup. The image of him being walked out of the team hotel, head bowed, surrounded by stony-faced officials, is one of the most devastating in sports history. His tournament was over. His career at the highest level was finished. The greatest player of his generation was sent home in disgrace, a cheat in the eyes of the world. The fairy tale had turned into a Shakespearean tragedy in the span of a urine sample. What followed were years that were hard to watch. A brief, sad return to Boca Juniors where he could barely move. His body, abused for so long, began to give out in dramatic fashion. His weight fluctuated wildly. He was hospitalized repeatedly with hypertension and heart arrhythmias. The global tabloids feasted on his downfall, publishing cruel photos of a bloated, disoriented man struggling to get into a car. He became a cautionary tale. In 2000, seeking an escape, he fled to Cuba, finding an unlikely guardian in Fidel Castro. For years, he drifted in and out of a clinic in Havana, fighting a battle for his life that was far more important than any football match. The world remembered the god, but saw only a broken, dying mortal. It seemed this would be the final, lingering chapter of his story, a slow, public fade into obscurity and poor health. But Diego Maradona's life was never linear. In 2005, he did something that would change his public image forever in Argentina. He launched a prime-time television show, La Noche del Diez. It was unscripted, chaotic, emotional, and utterly mesmerizing. He interviewed celebrities, broke down in tears talking about his family, launched furious political tirades, and analyzed football with a depth of understanding that reminded everyone why he was a genius. Argentina saw not just the flawed addict, but the intelligent, passionate, wounded, and hilarious man underneath. The public sympathy that had evaporated in 1994 came flooding back, stronger than ever. This redemption arc led to the most surreal twist of all. In 2008, the Argentine Football Association, in a move that defied all conventional wisdom, appointed Diego Maradona as the head coach of the national team. It was madness. He had no real coaching experience. His tactical knowledge was instinctive, not studied. But he had the one thing the team lacked: soul. The qualification campaign for the 2010 World Cup was a white-knuckle ride of bizarre press conferences, chaotic lineups, and last-gasp victories. He famously told the press critics to suck it and keep sucking. He fought with everyone, but he loved his players like sons. And somehow, through a mixture of luck, Lionel Messi's brilliance, and his own indomitable spirit, he qualified. At the World Cup in South Africa, he was the main event, pacing the touchline in a sharp gray suit, gesticulating wildly. He was the emotional heart of the team. They played thrilling, attacking football in the group stage. For a moment, it looked like the impossible might happen. Then, in the quarterfinals, they met a cold, efficient German machine. The tactical limitations of Maradona's pure passion were exposed in a brutal 4-0 defeat. He was fired soon after, but he left with his head held high. He had taken his country back to the World Cup, and he had reclaimed his place in the nation's heart. He was no longer a disgraced idol. He was our Diego, flawed and magnificent. The final years were a mix of health scares and enduring legend. He managed clubs in Dubai and Mexico, always making headlines. His body continued its struggle, but in Argentina his status was untouchable. When he died of a heart attack on November 25, 2020, the country truly stopped. 3 days of national mourning. His coffin lay in state at the presidential palace, draped in the Argentine flag and his iconic number 10 Napoli jersey. Over 1 million people filed past, weeping, singing, leaving flowers and football shirts. The funeral was not for a sportsman, it was for a national treasure, a symbol of struggle and triumph, the ultimate pibe who never stopped fighting. The boy from the dirt streets had finally, and forever, come home. To talk about Diego Maradona's legacy is to step onto a battlefield where statistics, emotions, national pride, and pure aesthetics collide in endless, beautiful, and sometimes brutal debate. There are players with better numbers, players with more trophies, players with longer careers at the pinnacle. But to watch Diego Armando Maradona play football at his peak was to witness something that transcended the sport's conventional metrics. It was art. It was rebellion. It was raw, untamed magic. This part of his story isn't about his life's timeline, but about dissecting the very essence of his genius and understanding why, for so many, the phrase, "the greatest of all time," begins and ends with him. Let's start with the feet. The left foot, of course, was the wand. It could do anything. It could caress a pass over 60 yards onto the exact laces of a teammate's boot, as he did so often for Napoli's Careca or Argentina's Valdano. It could whip a free kick with impossible dip and swerve, bending physics to his will. It could, in the tightest of spaces, with 3 defenders closing in, produce a touch so delicate and precise it was like watching a diamond cutter at work. But to focus only on the left is a mistake. His right foot, often called his wooden leg in jest, was underrated. He used it for stability, for clever little nudges, and occasionally for hammering a shot when the defense least expected it. His balance was supernatural, a product of those childhood games on uneven ground. He had a center of gravity so low that trying to knock him off the ball was like trying to topple a bowling ball. He would ride challenges, using the defender's momentum to spin away, emerging with the ball still glued to his foot. His dribbling wasn't just about speed, it was about rhythm. He would slow the game down to a walking pace, lulling defenders into a sense of security before exploding with 2 rapid touches that left them grasping at air. The famous run against England in 1986 wasn't just a series of dribbles, it was a 5-act play of deception, acceleration, and ruthless finishing. Then there was the mind. Maradona's football intelligence was often overshadowed by his physical gifts, but it was just as potent. He read the game 3 moves ahead. He understood space not as empty grass, but as territory to be conquered. He knew when to drop deep to collect the ball and orchestrate, and he knew the exact moment to surge into the penalty area and become the lethal finisher. His vision was panoramic. He would receive the ball with his back to goal and in one sweeping glance map the entire field. The pass to Jorge Burruchaga for the winning goal in the 1986 World Cup final is the ultimate example. Under immense physical pressure, in the dying minutes of the biggest game on earth, he saw a run no one else did and delivered a perfect defense-splitting through ball. This was not luck, it was the highest form of sporting cognition. But Maradona's greatness was not just in how he played, but in when and for whom he did it. His peak from 1986 to 1990 is arguably the most dominant any single player has ever been over the sport. In 1986, he single-handedly won Argentina the World Cup. The phrase single-handedly is overused in sports, but in that tournament, it is a literal fact. He scored 5 goals and made 5 assists, but the numbers don't capture it. He was responsible for over 70% of Argentina's attacking plays in the knockout stages. The goal of the century against England was the masterpiece, but the assist against Belgium, the dribble and finish against Italy, the leadership against West Germany, it was a sustained 7-game exhibition of carrying a team on his back. Then, at club level, he took Napoli, a team that had never won a major trophy and was perennially fighting relegation, and made them champions of Italy, not once, but twice, in the world's toughest, most cynical league. He also won them a UEFA Cup. He transformed a whole city, a whole region from losers into believers. This narrative of lifting the downtrodden is central to his mythos. He wasn't joining a ready-made super team like Barcelona or AC Milan. He built a super team around him in Naples. He was the ultimate underdog who became top dog, and he did it with a style that was both beautiful and street tough, mirroring the people he represented. This brings us to the inevitable comparison: Maradona versus Pelé versus Lionel Messi, the GOAT debate. Pelé's advocates point to the 3 World Cup wins, the staggering goal tally, the pristine, almost corporate legacy. Messi's fans point to the unprecedented longevity, the statistical dominance for over 15 years, the sublime consistency, and his own World Cup win in 2022. But Maradona's claim rests on different ground. It rests on the sheer, unquantifiable force of his talent and his influence. For a concentrated period, he was not just the best player in the world, he was the world of football. He played with a passion that was volcanic, sometimes destructive, but always authentic. He was human, magnificently, tragically human. His flaws were public, his struggles were epic, and they made his triumphs feel more earned, more real. While Pelé was a smiling ambassador and Messi is a quiet genius, Maradona was a raging, emotional hurricane. He played the game with the heart of a fan from the terraces. He cheated with the hand of God, and then, minutes later, scored the most honest, beautiful goal ever seen. He embodied the contradictions of the sport itself. Finally, his legacy is cultural. In Argentina, he is more than a footballer. He is a national symbol, a folk hero. In Naples, he is still D10. He represents the triumph of the poor South over the rich North, of passion over structure, of instinct over system. His life story is a modern epic, a rise, a fall, a partial redemption. He showed what football could mean when it was more than a game, when it was identity, politics, religion, and catharsis. The debate about the greatest will rage forever, fueled by new generations and new stars, but no one will ever play the game with the same combination of savage artistry, magnetic charisma, and transformative power as Diego Armando Maradona. His legacy isn't just in the trophy cabinet or the record books, it's in the feeling he gave to everyone who watched him. It's the feeling that anything was possible, that magic was real, and that a boy from the slums could, for a few glorious years, own the entire world. Diego Maradona's downfall is not just a story about a footballer who took drugs. It is a complex, heartbreaking saga of a man who was built up by the world as a god, and then left completely alone to deal with the impossible weight of that divinity. His addiction to cocaine was not the cause of his fall, but a symptom of a much deeper disease. The disease of being Diego Maradona in a world that only wanted the highlights, not the human being. The journey from the sun-drenched glory of the 1986 World Cup to the shamed exit in 1994 and the heartbreaking health battles that followed is a path paved with betrayal, systemic failure, and a personal vulnerability that was exploited at every turn. To truly understand this fall, we must start not with the powder, but with the pressure. Imagine being a boy from a slum, and by the age of 15, you are not just supporting your family, but you are carrying the hopes of an entire nation that sees you as its savior. Every glance, every newspaper headline, every word from a stranger is a demand for you to be perfect, to be magical, to be the answer to their dreams. There is no training for that. There is no coach who can teach you how to handle it. For Diego, the escape valve was the night. The pulsating nightclubs of Buenos Aires and later Barcelona and Naples were the only places where the noise stopped. In the early 1980s, cocaine was the fuel of that nightlife. It wasn't seen as a deadly addiction, it was the tool of the rich and famous, a way to stay awake, to feel invincible, to keep the party and the escape going. For a young man whose entire life was a performance, it offered a few hours where he felt in control of his own energy. The move to Naples in 1984 changed everything. On the surface, it was a perfect match, the world's greatest player joining the most passionate, marginalized city in Italy. But beneath the surface, Naples was a tinderbox of crime and chaos. The Camorra, the local mafia, didn't just operate there, they were the authority in many neighborhoods. They saw Maradona as the ultimate trophy. He was a cash machine and a symbol of Neapolitan pride they could control. They infiltrated his circle with ease. Suddenly, his friends weren't just old pals from Argentina, they were people with connections to the darkest corners of the city. His villa in Posillipo became a fortress where anything was possible and everything was available. The cocaine in Naples wasn't the street-level drug. It was pharmaceutical grade, pure and powerful. The parties were legendary, week-long affairs. The club, SSC Napoli, knew what was happening. The president, Corrado Ferlino, knew. The managers knew. But what could they do? He was winning them their first ever championships. He was making the club rich and famous. To confront him was to risk killing the golden goose. So they looked the other way. The Italian Football Federation had no real drug testing policy. The system was designed to protect the sport's image, not its players. Maradona was living in a bubble where every single person around him was either benefiting from his talent or afraid to tell him no. This is where the addiction transformed from a bad habit into a life-threatening illness. He was no longer using to have fun, he was using to function, to numb the pain of his injuries, to quiet the voices of expectation, to sleep, to wake up, to train, to play. The duality was absolute and terrifying. By day, he was D10, performing miracles in front of 70,000 Neapolitans. By night, he was a prisoner in his own home, chasing a high that could never match the adrenaline of the stadium. His body began to send signals. He had constant nosebleeds. His weight fluctuated wildly. His moods could swing from joyous to violent in seconds. Teammates would see him convulsing in the dressing room. Still, the machine kept running because he kept winning. The 1990 World Cup broke the spell. His emotional appeal to Neapolitans before the Italy game was the act of a man who felt untouchable, who believed his bond with the city placed him above the rules of the nation. When Argentina won that game, the Italian press and football establishment turned on him with a venom that was both professional and personal. He was no longer just a foreign player, he was a traitor. The authorities, now under the national spotlight, could no longer protect him. The random drug test in March 1991 that found cocaine in his system was the excuse they needed to cut him down. The 15-month ban wasn't just a suspension, it was a death sentence for his identity. What followed was a free fall. Without football, he had no structure, no purpose, no outlet for his colossal energy and emotion. His transfer to Sevilla was a farce. He was a shadow on the pitch. The 1994 World Cup in the United States was a desperate, final attempt to reclaim his narrative. For 2 games, he succeeded, playing with a joy and skill that made the world remember. Then, the drug test came back positive. The expulsion was the most public humiliation imaginable. This time, there was no club, no city, no nation to shield him. The global media painted him as a junkie and a cheat. The psychological impact was catastrophic. He entered a period of profound depression and physical collapse. His weight ballooned to over 120 kilograms. He was hospitalized repeatedly for heart problems. The tabloids published cruel photos of him looking bloated and disoriented. He became a global punchline, a cautionary tale. His retreat to Cuba in 2000 was an admission that he could not survive in the world he had helped create. Fidel Castro, another charismatic leader who defied superpowers, offered him sanctuary. For 4 years, he lived in a clinic, a patient and a political guest. This period saved his life in the short term by providing a strict, drug-free environment, but it was another form of isolation. He was not learning to live in the real world. He was living in a medicalized bubble. His return to Argentina in the mid-2000s and his rebirth as a television star was a brilliant act of self-reinvention. On his show, he was funny, intelligent, and vulnerable. He connected with the Argentine people on a human level they had never seen before. This public redemption allowed him to become the national team coach, a role he approached with pure, chaotic passion. But the underlying addiction was a monster that never fully left. There were constant relapses, more health crises, and the tragic spectacle of his later years in and out of hospitals. Diego Maradona's fall is the story of a perfect storm. It is the story of a child prodigy who never developed the emotional tools for adulthood. It is the story of a sport that consumes its brightest stars without a thought for their well-being. It is the story of criminals who saw a vulnerable man as an opportunity. And it is the story of a drug that promises power but only delivers slavery. He was a genius who could see passing lanes on a football pitch that were invisible to others, but he could not see the path to saving himself. In the end, the man who gave the world so much beauty was consumed by the very world he entertained. His tragedy is a permanent, dark stain on the beautiful game, a reminder that we must look after our heroes, because sometimes the gods we create are the most fragile of all. Diego Maradona's death on November 25, 2020, did not feel like the passing of a retired sportsman. It felt like the ground shifting beneath the feet of Argentina, Naples, and the entire football world. The official cause was a sudden cardiac arrest at his home in Tigre, but in truth, his heart had been carrying an unbearable load for 60 years. It was a heart that beat for the shantytowns, for the underdogs, for every person who ever felt overlooked by the powerful. When it stopped, the silence was deafening, but it was quickly filled by a roar of grief that echoed from the humble streets of Villa Fiorito to the grand boulevards of Buenos Aires and the bustling piazzas of Naples. In the days that followed, the world witnessed a phenomenon rarely seen: the funeral of a man who was genuinely loved as family by millions who had never met him. The Argentine government declared 3 days of national mourning. His coffin, draped in the national flag and his iconic number 10 Napoli jersey, was placed in the Casa Rosada, the presidential palace. This was unprecedented. The line of mourners stretched for over 20 blocks, a river of people that flowed for over 24 hours. They were old and young, rich and poor, dressed in football kits, holding pictures, crying openly, singing club anthems, and leaving offerings of flowers, bottles of wine, cans of Coke, and even footballs. This was not a state funeral for a dignitary. This was the wake for a brother, a son, a friend. In Naples, the city shut down. The Stadio San Paolo, renamed the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium in his honor just weeks before, became a shrine. Thousands gathered in the Piazza del Plebiscito, lighting candles under his mural. In the Quartieri Spagnoli, the working-class neighborhood that had adopted him as its own patron saint, people wept in the streets. The scenes were replicated in every corner of the globe where football is felt, not just watched. This collective outpouring proved something fundamental. Maradona was more than his trophies, more than his goals, more than his scandals. He had become a myth, and myths do not die. They settle into the soul of a culture. So, what is the true legacy of Diego Armando Maradona? It is a legacy carved in contradictions, as complex and compelling as the man himself. On one hand, he is the ultimate footballing genius, the standard against which all others are measured in terms of pure, transformative talent. For that magical 7-year period, from 1986 to 1993, he was the undisputed best player on the planet, achieving the ultimate double, carrying a modest national team to World Cup glory, and then lifting a mediocre club side to the pinnacle of the world's toughest league. No one else has ever done that. His highlights reel is a collection of moments that defy logic. The dribble against England, the dribble against Belgium, the pass to Burruchaga, the countless times he turned a dead play into a goal for Napoli with a flick, a feint, or a thunderous strike. He played the game with a street footballer's creativity and a concert pianist's touch. He made the impossible look simple. For anyone who believes football is an art form, Maradona is its most brilliant and chaotic masterpiece. But his legacy is also one of profound humanity and flaw. He never pretended to be a clean-cut hero. He was the hand of God and the goal of the century in the same 5-minute span. He was the addict and the savior. He was the loudmouth who insulted the powerful, and the soft-hearted man who cried on television. In an age where athletes are increasingly polished media products, Maradona was infuriatingly, beautifully real. He showed every crack, every mistake, every ounce of pain. This made him relatable in a way that perfection could never be. The people of Argentina and Naples saw in him their own struggles, their own rebellions, their own capacity for both great joy and great sorrow. They were them. He proved that you could come from nothing, be deeply flawed, make terrible mistakes, and still achieve immortality. He was a symbol of redemption, though his own redemption was always a work in progress. His legacy is also deeply political. He was a man of the left, a fierce critic of American imperialism, a friend of Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez. He wore a tattoo of Che Guevara on his right arm. He saw football and politics as inseparable, understanding that the sport was a weapon for the poor, a way to claim dignity and victory in a world stacked against them. When he urged Neapolitans to remember how the north of Italy looked down on them, he was engaging in class warfare through a football microphone. This political stance made him a controversial figure for many, but it cemented his status as a genuine folk hero for the disenfranchised. He wasn't just playing against England in 1986, he was, in his mind and in the minds of millions, avenging the Falkland War. He gave people a sense of agency through his play. Finally, his legacy is the eternal debate, the question of Maradona or Pelé, or now Maradona or Messi, is a ritual that fuels football conversations in bars, cafes, and social media threads across the planet. This debate itself is part of his gift to the sport. It keeps him alive. It forces us to define what we value most. Is it Pelé's pristine statistics and 3 World Cups? Is it Messi's alien-like consistency and technical perfection over 15 years? Or is it Maradona's sheer, explosive, universe-bending peak, where for a short time he was football, with all its beauty, dirt, passion, and madness? There is no right answer, and that is the point. His existence creates the argument, and as long as people argue about him, he is not gone. In the end, Diego Armando Maradona leaves behind a simple, powerful truth. Football is not just a game of passing and scoring. It is a vessel for emotion, identity, and story. He filled that vessel to the brim and then overflowed it. He was the ultimate proof that a person could kick a ball, and in doing so, kick a hole in the universe, letting a little bit of magic spill out for everyone to see. He was flawed, fragile, and magnificent. The boy from the dirt lot who dreamed of a World Cup did much more than win it. He became the World Cup. He became the dream itself. And long after his last breath, that dream, that chaotic, glorious, heartbreaking dream, is still alive in every left-footed kid practicing tricks in a back alley, in every roar of a crowd when something impossible happens on the pitch, and in the collective memory of a world that once watched a god walk among us, wearing number 10. The end.